right, should we start? I'm the moderator. I have the biggest chair. I'm happy. All right. Thank you, everyone, for being with us today. Today, we'll talk about DeFi, privacy, and what's cooking in 2026. So thank you for all of our guests for being here. Next to me, I have, well, actually, maybe can you try to each present yourself in a sentence or two? Let's start with you, Jonathan.
Hi everyone, I'm Jonathan. I'm with Flashbots. I lead the privacy research team there.
Hi everyone, I'm Partners Onchain. I'm the CTO at iExec.
Hi everyone, Adrian. I work for Portofino, market making, HFT, all those fun topics.
Hi everyone, I'm Tarek Riviere. I'm one of the co-founders at Ocuros.
Thank you. And I'm Henri Lieutot. I'm VP product at the Starknet Foundation, which is a layer 2 on Ethereum. All right, let's get started. And my first question is to you, Adrien. So you're working for a market maker. You interact both with crypto native as well as institutional profile. What's the state of the art regarding privacy in 2026? And by this, I mean, what's table stake? What are the things that everybody expects that you should deliver regarding privacy as a market maker? And what are the cutting edge features that people like to use and interact with?
I mean, I think it's important to look back and see from where crypto comes from, and also like look further. I think like one of the big topics of today is institutions and how they will adopt crypto and blockchain in general. If we look back like 2017, 2016, like it was still like a bunch of crypto bros that were interacting with each other. Like there was not so much external scrutiny on everything that was happening. It was an insider market. There was no like real, also like apps like Arkham, Bubble Maps, all those labeling or intelligence apps. There was no real need back then for privacy, because anywhere like first transparency is at the core of the blockchain ecosystem, and on top of that you were interacting generally with counterparts you knew and with people that were on a kind of similar view as you. Nowadays, like it's quite critical to actually think also about like institutions, and there is more and more like the FT very often quotes Arkham, very often quotes Bubble Maps and so on. I think there's also like a security matter. Not everyone wants to be known on chain for different security reasons. And just generally like institutions want to be protected also with the orders. You can have a lot of predatory behaviors on chain.
Do we see a lot of those actually?
I mean, it's always like you have to speculate a bit. You're never like so sure about what's really happening. But if you think about like the 10th of October, for example, like you can always think about like some liquidation targets that were triggered because you know exactly where market makers and where like some big guys are. So if you want to hurt someone on Hyperliquid, for example, it's not so hard. So that's also explains, the need for nowadays more privacy and solutions that fit both the crypto native and institutions.
All right, thank you. So the more flow there is on chain, the more people there is in the room, probably the bigger the risk. And so that's why people are starting to pay attention. And we have a good tradition in the space in being paranoid. So we'll probably want to be more shielded in the future. Thanks. My next question is to you, Francis. So you're CTO at iExec. You've been in the space for a few years now, right? You started in 2017. You've probably seen a bunch of stuff, and you've seen a lot of narratives come and go. And privacy has always been part of the discourse. Maybe not always, but it has had its highs, it's low, then highs again, then lows again. I'm curious, how did you see that conversation evolved around the year? Did it shift? Is there anything new under the sun? How did things evolve?
Yeah, you're right. iExec has been there for a long time. And even before iExec existed, the conversation about privacy was about fixing the issue of pseudo anonymity on the public blockchain. So all the transactions on the value that's being exchanged on public chains were or are public and visible to anyone, and that makes proper adoption and usage very complicated, especially for institutions. But back then the discussion was around that. So how do we alleviate the issue of discovering who's hiding behind a specific wallet address? So that was really the idea to fix the promise of the original cypherpunk vision, around decentralization. That was missing the very important bit around privacy. And then came up the EVM, and I think we understood that the exchange of value and money was interesting, but we could go further from the exchange of money. And that's where we see the promise going even further by bringing everybody true ownership about their digital assets. And that's where privacy still comes into play. So initially, we had concerns about on-chain privacy. The EVM opened the door to fixing the privacy of chain as well.
But didn't the EVM make things worse? Because in UTXO-based blockchains, right, it's much easier. You have many different accounts that own many different nodes, whereas the EVM centralizes everything on a single account. Or you can have a few, but people tend to have only one thing, right? So it was a bit of a double-edged sword. On the one hand, it brought more programmability so that you could get actual privacy. But on the other hand, in practice, it led to a lot more doxing, no?
True. That's exactly what projects like iExec and others out there came up with, fixing this issue with giving the ability to process and manipulate this data of chain and have much stronger and much complex privacy processing being done as well. So right now we see the need for institutions to come on chain. They understand what this infrastructure can bring to them, the blockchain can bring to them, but they're missing that very important bit, which is privacy.
Wonderful. Thank you, Francis. And so you talked about institutions. I think it's a nice segue to our next panelist, which is Tarek. You're working at Ocuros. And Tarek, you have a fairly long background both in institutional finance as well as in ZK projects, right? You're the founder at Ocuros. And so you're sitting at the crossword between the crossroads between crypto and traditional finance. I'm curious what crypto lacks compared to traditional finance. What are the things missing for it to be on par with what you can do in traditional finance markets, and what it can achieve down the line that will bring it to a higher level?
Yeah, no, thank you. That's the big topic. Really, you want to look at the full ecosystem or the full experience from an institutional standpoint. So there's really first financial intermediation. That's the first component. And then there are a number of regulatory requirements that come around the intermediation itself. So starting with the financial intermediation, there's two sides of it. Price discovery, try and find somebody who has a matching interest to you, and then execute. And it's interesting because I've just labeled 3 buckets here: price discovery, execution, and then regulatory requirements. On these 3 buckets, I would argue that crypto is ahead of traditional finance, or has the potential to be ahead of traditional finance. There's one bucket where I think it's playing catch up. So appearances are a little deceiving in the sense that I think crypto is in stronger footing than the perception generally is. So I'll start with the price discovery because I think that's the most glaring gap in traditional finance. Institution currently, when they have a large block, any asset, stock, bond, any block, and they're trying to find a counterpart through the OTC market. There's been some talks earlier on that very topic. the process is a little bit more art than science, which is crazy in 2026. So basically, the institutional trader will reach out to an OTC broker. Of course, there's a song and dance about the interest and what he's looking for, because he doesn't really want to reveal or leak his interest in full, because that would be detrimental to the economics of his execution. But for the people that this OTC broker will reach out to, there's the same constraint. They often are very cagey. They will disclose a little bit of what they can offer, but not fully, and it becomes a song and dance and gymnastics around, I'm good in 10, can you do more, etc. It's a process that takes time. It's a process that is not perfect by any means, and it's a process that leaks information. Today with crypto, with MPC and many techniques attached to crypto, you can have this process instant with absolute no leakage of information. So you can turn to 1,000, I could turn to this entire room with a block of equity and ask everyone for their interest. None of the information about my intention or anybody's intention would be leaked. The only thing you get out of the process is the match in under a second. So in that respect, crypto is already, and the technology is pretty much there. Oculus is working on it. There's a couple of others. So it's the reality today. When it comes to execution, what's really interesting is there's different aspects here. I'll take the US, for example. In the US, the Securities Act of 1934 drives a lot of the disclosure and the transparency in capital markets. So Reg NMS is Rule 603, actually, is what drives the disclosure of information on the national tape in the US. And so that's a disclosure around the obligation to disclose an NBBO, the obligation to disclose transaction that hit the tape with anonymity, but no confidentiality. So the volume, the size, etc., is well known. So I mean, a lot of interest and efforts have gone into crypto in upgrading to this privacy rail, and you've seen a lot of, efforts. There's been Railgun, there's been Oxbow. There's a lot of platforms that are coming online that offer this, and there's ones that are upgrading to that level of service. So crypto is getting there. And finally, very quickly on the regulatory front, another area where crypto really shines is if you look at the potential for zero knowledge, for instance, which really is a technology that is absolutely great at ensuring the integrity of the computational process. We've had a roller conveyor belt of data breaches in recent years where, the customer data would be warehoused by a company who doesn't want the data, but they just have to KYC that customer. And now with zero knowledge proof, what you can do is the customer can become self-sovereign, and he can actually conduct the KYC process in the same way that the institution would, and then generate a proof that they did it with integrity and share that, and that becomes their passport. So I would say that's 2 to 1 on crypto here.
Wonderful. Well, optimistic. That's nice. All right, my next question is for you, Jonathan.
Hello.
Hey. So you're working at Flashbot. Can you give us a bird's eye view of what Flashbot is? And then if you can take us a little bit, what does it look like in practice for end users? And specifically, I understand you're working on privacy projects. Like how does that impact the user, specifically on best execution on underflow and MEV protection?
Right, so the simple way of depicting Flashbots is that we are building blocks on the Ethereum blockchain. About 30 to 40% of blocks are built in our infrastructure. It used to be like a solo builder, and now we have this product called BuilderNet, which is a network of block builders that share order flow and all run in TEs for confidentiality and integrity properties. And you have the guarantee that they all run the same exact block building software and have access to a much bigger share of order flow to build, hopefully, better blocks than they would otherwise.
What's a better block? It's better for who? For the user or for the builder?
Hopefully better for everyone. The way the landscape works as of today is that the actor that makes the most money in the MEV supply chain is the validator. So most of the MEV is accrued by the validator, not by us, not by the block builders. not by the MEV searchers, if you heard that term. So it's like the sophisticated traders that find the MEV opportunities. They have to give away a lot of what they capture to the validator, because ultimately the validator is the one who's pushing the block on chain. So today, that's how it works. The goal is to make that, I would want to say, a bit more fair, and acknowledge that everyone has a role to play in this chain. So yes, the validator is pushing the block, and no one could lend any MEV opportunity without this validator's slot. But at the same time, the block builder is putting together a block that is, arguably better than what the validator could do by itself. And of course, you've got the user, right? If in the first place, the user was not triggering a swap or any other kind of DeFi activity, you would not have any MEV triggered. So it's fair to say that the user, the end user, should get a rebate on the MEV opportunities that are triggered. And that's what we're trying to do, to be fair. So one of the aspects as well of, I like what you said before about the integrity of calculations. It's also something that can make everyone more confident then they can take part in this complex supply chain that I was describing. And a simple way of thinking about it is that, yes, you can have private order flow going into these like magical sandboxes of TEs, but because you have this integrity property, everyone can be comfortable that you are being executed as the builder should do, and that you are being rebated a specific amount of MEV that is, for example, defined by a formula, and everyone can verify this formula. So you know that if you take part in these kind of protocols, you know that your activity is going to be rewarded as fairly as can be by this protocol, and you're not going to be taken advantage of by any of the actors in the chain.
Thank you. Interesting. So a lot of it is around bringing some sort of accountability or traceability around, okay, there's value being shared, here's your share, and here's why you got it. Interesting. Thank you. All right, let's talk. I have an open question here because we talked about many different ways of implementing privacy. Let's try to define those, right? So we have MPEC, and SK. Let's try to define those. MPC, FHE, TEE, ZK. Who wants to pick one? All right. Francis, which one you're picking?
I'll pick TEs. Yes, TEs. I would say that TEs' superpower is the ability to run verifiable computation on private data on untrusted hardware. So basically, you can run an application processing private data, and even the owner of the machine doesn't have access to what's happening. So the data is encrypted in memory, the code is verifiable. So as Jonathan said, everyone can verify that the calculation is the one that was advertised and published. So that makes it very interesting for DeFi use cases, for decentralized oracles, and it makes it very interesting to when there's a need to process that data in with heavy workloads, high frequency, while keeping integrity and ownership of your asset.
Fantastic. Magical sandbox. Oh, wait, no. No, but okay. Sorry. Derek.
I'll take the FHE, but I'll talk about the AHE actually, which is a slight variant to make it interesting. So additively homomorphic encryption is a little bit long on the tooth, but what its superpower is that it's not as complex as FHE, it's not as heavy as FHE, but you can supplement it with techniques that are well known in literature, such as SpeedZ, that enable you to basically run any computation through AHE, but you can. One of the benefits of it is that it is very efficient and it can power a very large throughput. So with AHE, you're able to, you can define a committee of parties that will jointly perform the computation, and you can get, in the case of financial transaction, you can get in the thousands of transactions per second, which is not as good as TE, but for the world of MPC is a good performance.
Thank you, Derek. Jonathan?
I think that's a good segue because, like you said, MPC at the end. So I'll take two at the same time, if you don't mind. MPC and FHE. It's all MPC, basically. A multi-party computation. So the ability for different parties that do not trust each other to compute jointly an output based on their respective private data. And there's multiple ways of doing it. FHE is one of them, where you are able to encrypt data in such a way that you can still compute over the ciphertext with the decrypting. So HE is one way, the F is for fully, so you can do any kind of operations. And why I'm saying it's an MPC, it's because that if you turn that protocol, which is relatively simple, from a private key version to a public key version, so that we are all aware of in today's cryptography, everyone can encrypt against the same public key, and you can thus perform a joint computation against this key. Then the question is how do you decrypt? Who gets to decrypt and when? We can talk about that as well. But that's one way of doing MPC. Another way that is what people usually mean by MPC is secret sharing based MPC, whereas the type of cryptography is different. And in that case, you imagine that you literally split, you decompose each of the pieces of data that you're trying to compute upon into shares that can be either additive shares or polynomial shares, and that can be computed upon separately. And when you need to join them together to do more complex operations, then the parties need to communicate. So on the secret sharing based MPC, you're light in computation, but you're heavy in communications. So it doesn't really work pretty well across the internet. It works well if you have a low number of parties and if they are well connected in the same network. If you go for FHE, you pay a heavy price in raw computation, but there's basically no communication. You just communicate once when you submit the ciphertext to this one party and when you decrypt. But the computation itself is all done locally.
Thank you. Adrien, you're stuck with ZK.
I mean, ultimately, ZK is probably the one that is the less relevant in my case. ZK is great because mostly for the post-trading operations or the pre-trading operations, compliance, settlement, all those things, zero knowledge. You basically say that you know without saying what you actually know. So ZK is great for that. It's less, in our use case, FHE and the TE are probably the most relevant ones, because TE is high frequency, though you rely on a centralized party, so it has potential cons. FHE is slower, but it's great to protect an algorithmic strategy or whatever. So if you're less latency sensitive, FHE does an amazing work. ZK is great for us more to work around the trading and not within the trading.
Super interesting. Thank you. All right, I see we're getting close to time, so maybe let's wrap up this panel with a more open question, right? What are the things you're looking for? If you can, in a couple of phrases or two or three, what are the things you're looking for in 2026 regarding private DeFi? What kind of primitives, what kind of interesting patterns or behaviors do you expect to see in 2026, or what do you hope to see? You can start, Adrien.
I mean, I think one of the big innovations of the past year was, in DeFi at least, was related to the high-performance DEXs, let's say. If we think about the Hyperliquid and all of those, it brought tremendous execution quality to the overall DeFi compared to standard AMMs, let's say, that do an amazing job, but perhaps for professional market makers or for more institutional, it's a less understood environment than centralized order books. So I think this brought a first good layer of, a lot of the market makers adopted very quickly Hyperliquid and all the others. I think I never saw such a high amount of adoption on that front. So now it's about how do we make it relevant as well for institutions that are not the regular crypto market makers, that are just traditional hedge funds, traditional trading companies that will have interest in trading those pubs, will have interest in getting this access to a 24/7 market that is supposed to be fair in a sense. But while preserving some features that are quite key to them, like private, like dark pools or whichever that are important in the traditional market.
Thank you.
I'm super excited because like we've discussed about these tools. We have these tools. They're not perfect, but they are usable by now. And we have a lot of like DeFi protocols that can now be more composable while remaining private. And that's very interesting because that's not just for privacy of the inputs that the users or the flow that they are sending to these protocols, but the hidden source, the strategies that these guys are cooking to basically give you the best execution. Now we can start to see how they can compose together, or within one TE, or within like with this joint FHE protocols, for example. That would allow them to build basically more complex DeFi. We were talking about like DeFi bricks in the early days of DeFi. The composability was like really a thing that people were stressing. But if you have composability without privacy, you don't get good execution. And now we have the tools to do that. So I'm pretty bullish that we will see eventually blocks on the chain being built by different entities. Some will be specialized in like accessing specific orbs. Some will do liquidations. And all together, they'll do a block that's like more valuable than the others before, and that any one entity could do by itself.
Thank you. Francis, Tarek?
Yes, thank you, Jonathan, because that's exactly what I wanted to say. No, I think we are seeing and witnessing the how stable coins are penetrating the market, and it's becoming common usage now. And what I'm looking forward to see in 2026 is privacy preserving stable coins being composable that can be integrated in any DeFi protocol and seamlessly for the end user. There's something that we haven't touched on is the developer experience and the end user experience, and that's going to be key to make this ecosystem and market grow even further.
Preach. Tarek?
Yeah, just on the back of those two, there are like two core, concepts right now. One thing that is interesting too is a trend that we've seen and that might be accelerating is the trend away from L2, or the perception that smart contract-based anonymity and confidentiality platform seem to have a little bit more momentum than the L2. There was the Vitalik, obviously, everybody heard the comment he made around L2s recently, but if you look at platforms like Railgun in terms of confidentiality, they've started integrating native operation to DEXs, and that's very powerful, obviously. So an acceleration of that trend into the year. And also, we talked about price discovery and the power that you can get to crypto in terms of protecting your intention. So you probably will see this year an integration, not just DEX to confidentiality pools, but also with this emerging price discovery tools that are coming up. So
Nice. So we have a lot of things to look forward to. People, thank you for your time, and see you soon.